Welcome back to another episode of GSC. I know it's been kind of a long time. I've been kind of busy. I've done a career change yet again. The day job just wasn't the day job I expected to be. So, that being said, trying to get back to things. Old Casper is making some sounds and doing some things that should not have. So I'm going to flip this camera around and we're going to talk about it for a minute and explain what's going to get fixed. So you've all seen this engine bay a number of times. And I have changed the injection pump in this truck. This will be number 4. The pump that's in it now is starting to go bad. The closure time is dancing and fluttering, and it's actually causing a knock at idle and below 700 RPM. So I'm going to go ahead and pull my charge tube off here, intake tube, catch can parts, and I'm going to go ahead and probably pull the turbo too and show you guys how to reseal a valve cover, because the passenger one on this happens to leak way back there where you can't see it, but it needs to be done. So I'm going to go ahead and let this thing cool off. I just brought it down from the farm, and then we'll start tearing them apart. So hopefully this is educational for a few of you guys, because I'm doing yet another injection pump job, and I'll try to film as many of the steps as I can here and also do a valve cover replacement. So let's let this thing cool off and get cracking. As you can see, air intake is out, catch can lines are off, upper intake charge tube is off. A lot of people keep asking me, where's your intercooler? Well, you see how big this S300 is, and when I tried to clock it, I would have had to cut a very large chunk out of this inner fender to continue running that intercooler. So went ahead, went back to non-intercooled. It's fine. The truck still tows fine. My air intakes temps usually don't peak above 200 degrees. I know that's hot, but realistically with the intercooler I had in it, I was only seeing about a 40 degree to 70 degree charge temp drop, which was still between 110 and 130 degrees. So yes, every little bit helps with an IDI, but right now we're gonna try to focus on getting this valve cover out of here. And it's kind of tight all the way across, but I think I'm gonna go ahead and start working my way to pulling the downpipe adapter here off the turbocharger and work on getting him out, and that way we can then start focusing on the injection pump. So on a stock 6.5, you do have a Borg-Warner turbocharger, but it's considerably smaller than this. You'll need a 11mm or a 7/16 deep well to take your V-band clamp off and get him off your downpipe. Get this out of the way, and then you've got 4 bolts in your turbo pedestal. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And once those are loose, you can get this out of the way. On a stock turbo, you actually have to go from under the truck, and they are 15mm nuts. On an S300, these are 17mm. After those are out, you need your 3/4 inch feed line here pulled off and your drain removed, which on mine is a quad star style drain, so it pushes and pulls right out, O-ring fittings. So I'll go ahead and get these 4 out of my pedestal, get my feed off, get this up and out of here, and then we can talk more about this valve cover. Turbocharger is out and out of the way. See my T3 T4 adapter here is still in place. Now you can see where that valve cover is leaking in the back here. It's pretty wet, and it's also all over the starter and the back of the block, so definitely a good time to do this before it gets worse. So now that we have plenty of room for extracurricular activities in here, I'll go ahead and start removing my injector lines off the injectors. I've got a 3/4 crow's foot that I use on a small breaker bar. That way I don't damage the nuts. And yeah, start popping our return lines off, and that way they're up out of our way. Just gotta give them a light tug and they pull off. I'm gonna try not to damage these because I just put them on about a month and a half ago, so if I can prevent from having to buy another set, I probably will. So we're gonna get these guys out of here, get them out of our way, and try to save them, salvage them best I can. Usually all I do is I trim just a nub off the end, and that way they don't leak. So that's where we're at. I'll go ahead and get these injector lines broke loose with my crow's foot here. Get him down in there and wiggle him on. Definitely easier to do two-handed, but we'll see if I can do one. Nope. All right, we'll get these knocked loose, and then we'll start working our way to taking that oil fill tube off. All right, so I'm leaving the driver's side together for the moment, just so everybody can kind of see what it all looks like still. Passenger side, turbocharger's out, injector lines are off, return lines are pulled. Now I need to work on my oil fill tube. These are both 13 millimeters. Use yourself a deep well and get those out of your way. Pop the oil fill tube off. Then you get back inside, and there's 3 13 millimeter bolt heads in the injection pump drive gear. You'll get those out of your way, and that way you can go ahead and get this pump out. Now, I will say one thing I usually like to do. Notice the batteries are still hooked up. I like to take the fill tube out and take my 3 drive gear bolts out first, so I don't have to sit here and bar the engine over. And then I disconnect the batteries. Once those 3 bolts are out and the engine is at rest, and that way nothing can move or get funky on you. So I'll get this popped out of here, show you guys reaching through to get to those drive gear bolts, and then we will start working our way back into the upper lower intake manifold here, getting the injection lines and the return lines off the driver's side. And yeah, just keep plugging away. This is not a short or quick project. Oil fill tube is off. Hard to see inside there, but there are bolts that protrude through. There's 3 of them. So take my ratchet here and I'll poke through, get a hold of my first one if I can find him, and then I'll start backing these bolts out. So this is a 2-hand process, and I strongly suggest concentrating when you do it, because the last thing you want to do is drop a bolt down inside the engine. Drive gear bolts are out. Use the starter and bumped it over so I wasn't farting around barring it over. You can see in there, there's your little drive bolt hole, one of the 3. Now I got to work on getting my upper lower plenum out of here, and I'm actually going to pull the injection pump with all 8 lines fastened to it so you guys can see it as a system. Lower plenum bolts are out, 15 millimeter deep well for the middle ones, and a standard for the outers. I usually just use a universal and sneak down here with a standard 15 millimeter socket. That way everything gets broke free. The exciting part is getting this thing to let go, because usually the gaskets bake on pretty good. So I'll get that pulled once I can get the gaskets to let go, and we'll pop this out of here. A couple light taps with a rubber mallet, and away it went. Now that everything's up and out, I need to take my 3 flange bolts here off to allow the injection pump to be free. Remove the feed line here. This is a Feed the Beast mod from Leroy Diesel, and I need to start making sure that everything's unplugged here. I got the optic sensor here on the top. I have one of the control sensors here on the side. I have the stepper motor at the bottom here. So realistically, fuel shut off here on the side. All right, everything's undone from the pump. It is now free to move about the engine bay. So I'll go ahead and get these 3 flange bolts off. And I'm going to try to pull the pump out without taking the lines off, because I do want to show you guys kind of what this looks like when it's all out of the truck. 3 flange bolts, well, capture nuts are out. It is free. I've slid the pump back. I'm going to work on getting this guy out of here, and then I'm going to give you all a tip that is very critical when you're replacing an injection pump. Pump is out, lines are out. As you can see, I ripped my heater line off, so that was an exciting 30 seconds. Here's our 60 millimeter Borg, my new to me pump that has only about 300 miles on it. This is the old pump, and I just wanted to take it out and show you guys what it looks like with all the lines on it, just as a FYI. It is absolute hell to try to take one of these pumps out with the lines on them. I don't usually recommend it, but I wanted to do this so you could see it. The other thing that's critical is notice where this dowel pin is. I'm going to turn this pump. I'm going to put that dowel in about the same spot. And that way I know that that's how this pump needs to go in. Because they do need to line up and match. So I'm going to go ahead and clean him up and just get him set back in there. No lines. And then I'll pull the lines off this and put them back on. But it's just give you an idea of what you're dealing with and why you can't get the valve covers and some of the other components is because of that big octopus yank out of there. So now that that's off, we can go and try to get to our valve cover here. There's 2, 4, 6, 8 bolts on him. And you usually need a pry bar and a mallet to get that popped out of there. So I'm gonna go ahead and feed that injection pump back in, and that's where hopefully I'll see some success here. Slip the new pump in. Having that dowel pin aligned just like the old pump makes it pretty easy. You slide in. I just put 1 drag gear bolt in for now and the top nut just to keep it kind of secure. Now I'm gonna go grab my wire ends and then we'll work on doing this valve cover. 8 valve cover bolts are out. Now these are RTV'd on usually from the factory and they don't really like to come off. As you can see, they're kind of one with the head by this point in their life. There we go. All right, valve cover's out. You can see the edge that was leaking and that it pushed through the RTV over the years. This is the first time I've ever had Casper's engine open, and I've had this truck since 2012. So I'm really not too upset by this. Not really surprised that it leaks either. My wonderful mallet here helped me knock this thing clean off the head. Everything looks pretty good inside. So I'll set this valve cover down and give the rockers a quick check over. Other than having 190,000 miles on it, this engine's actually remarkably clean. Rockers feel pretty okay. Buttons don't feel bad. Rocker shafts are a little wobble got, but not too bad. Not any worse than the last 6.5 I worked on, so not too shabby. Not too shabby at all. Cool. Well, I guess I'll clean up this head and clean up the valve cover. Go get my RTV and glue him back on, and that way I can get this thing closed up, get some injector lines on it, and see if maybe, just maybe, I can have it running by the end of the day. After a quick intermission, aka lunch break, went ahead and cleaned up my original valve cover and put him back on, only because I had an issue with the new replacement valve covers I bought. Now, some of you may not care, some of you may care. Bought these nice little valve covers from Rock Auto. Come with the packing in them for the CDR. And this stuff literally fell out when I flipped it over. And I didn't want this falling into my valve train. So we're gonna wait to use this guy until I can get some better packing for him. But the valve cover's on. Everything cleaned up pretty good. Looks the way it's supposed to. I use black RTV and I just go around the surface of the head and then I put the valve cover on. So now the fun part, let it dry for 4 to 6 hours before we can start the engine. But I've probably got 4 to 6 hours of work, so it all works out because I need to get all my lines back on this pump, fix the glow plug control wire that I broke when I was taking the injection pump and all the lines out the first time. So that's a hassle, and it's a hazard of trying to pull the pump out without taking everything else out with it. I did it just to kind of show you guys what you'd be getting yourself into if you tried to pull the whole system out. But a lot of times what happens is these lines end up getting caught on things, and when they get caught, then they bend, and then they're a pain in the butt to get back on. And the other problem is they could tear wires and stuff because they're stainless and they really don't move a whole lot. So I'm gonna go ahead and start getting the lines off this and keep letting them dry, and then we'll have ourselves a little bit of a reassembly party here. Well, for those of you doing this the first time, you're gonna look down and say this looks okay. For those of you who've done it multiple times, you're gonna see that I forgot to slip the intake manifold gaskets in before I started doing injector lines, which it's not necessarily world ending, but it is kind of a hindrance. So once I finish getting these injector lines on the pump, I'll go back through and just lift the lines lightly and slip the gaskets under and show you guys how to do that. All right, so intake manifold gasket, best thing to do is slip it under your front injection lines and just snake into the back, go a little too far so you get past your return line here. Lift up the rear, put your little alignment dowel in, boom, and boom, maybe. There we go. It's in. I didn't have to take lines back off or fight with it too bad. So if you do forget to put them on, it's not the world's biggest deal. Pumps in, pump lines are on. I got to do injector lines here. I'll start lining these up and putting them on as we go. Once I get all those on, I will walk you through your return lines and doing the upper intake manifold. Injector lines are on the passenger side here. Looped in all the return lines and put the little rubber bumper stop on the back. You can see I kind of try to keep them tucked up under these injection lines, that way they're not getting any closer to the turbo than they have to. So I'm going to go ahead and probably button up this passenger side, set the turbo back on, and work my way back to the driver's side, because it's definitely easier to do one than the other. Passenger side, I got the turbocharger on, the drain, the feed line, injection lines, return lines. I got to do my exhaust housing adapter back here in a minute, and then this side will be buttoned up. I've got the injector lines on the driver's side, and once I have everything else hooked up, fire the engine over, get your 3 drive bolts back in, and you're well on your way to test firing your truck. Injector lines are on. Plenum is partially in, turbo's on, downpipe adapter. I'm gonna go ahead and put my ground straps back on, and that way I can bar this thing over with the battery because I'm lazy, and get my other 2 pump bolts in, and then we're pretty much ready to try to make some smoke and see if it makes truck sounds. So gonna go ahead and get these last few bolts taken care of for the intake plenum. We'll fire it up, see how it is, and get ready to try to do the timing procedure. Oil fills on, got my CDR plumbed back up for the most part. I already bled the fuel system. There we go. A valve cover replacement and an injection pump, all in one day here on Casper. Running nice and smooth, sounds pretty good. Now I just got to go and set up and do the timing procedure, and we'll be off to the races. Negative 0.79 TDCO, 10.4 degrees actual, 10.5 degrees desired time. It'll blow by at 190,000 miles, but this is smooth. Awesome. Hopefully this helps some of you guys out, and good luck on your 6.5 journeys. Makes you feel better when everything's like zip tied up and looks tidy. I know to most it looks like a rolling bag of marbles, but it's cleaned up. Oil's changed. Right time for a test drive. So the pump swap in Casper was a success. The valve cover sealed, everything works good. I've put about 50 miles on it today without any problems. You want a Tech 2 to do your timing procedure on a 96 to 2000. I do not have a good solution for an OBD1 94, 95 truck. The other thing is that any steps that I might have missed are in the original injection pump video that I did about 2.5 years ago. So if you're in any questions, look us up on Facebook, and thanks for watching.